In the summer of 1941, Adolf Hitler stood at the height of power no European ruler had ever known. From the cliffs of Normandy to the streets of Warsaw, Nazi banners waved over a continent that had once belonged to kings, republics, and democracies. France had fallen in weeks. The Netherlands surrendered in days. Norway was seized from the sea and sky. Yugoslavia collapsed almost overnight. Even the mighty French army, once feared across Europe, crumbled before Germany's lightning war. Hitler's empire stretched farther than Napoleon's ever had. And yet, at that very moment, when Germany controlled almost all of Europe, Hitler made a decision that would quietly begin destroying everything he had built. Not on a battlefield, not in a speech, but in his mind. It was the decision to invade the Soviet Union. By 1941, Hitler believed destiny itself protected him. Every gamble he had taken had worked. He remilitarized the Rhineland. No one stopped him. He absorbed Austria. No one fought him. He dismantled Czechoslovakia. No one resisted. He invaded Poland. Britain and France declared war, but did nothing to stop him at first. Then came the miracle victories. Blitzkrieg smashed Poland in weeks. Denmark surrendered in hours. Norway fell. Belgium collapsed. France, Europe's strongest army, disintegrated in 6 weeks. Hitler now ruled Europe from Paris cafes and Berlin palaces. German officers drank wine in conquered capitals. Wehrmacht columns rolled through cities that once commanded empires. To Hitler, it felt supernatural. He believed history had chosen him, and that belief was dangerous, because success teaches men the wrong lessons. There was one enemy Hitler had not crushed: Britain. After France fell, Hitler expected London to negotiate. Instead, Winston Churchill promised resistance. Hitler ordered the Luftwaffe to destroy the Royal Air Force. If Germany controlled the sky, invasion would follow. The Battle of Britain exploded over southern England. Day after day, German bombers attacked airfields and radar stations. British pilots flew exhausted, sometimes 4 or 5 missions a day. Losses mounted. Germany was close. Very close, then Hitler changed targets. Instead of finishing the RAF, he ordered bombers to strike London in revenge for British raids on Berlin. The Blitz began. Cities burned. But the RAF survived. And because the RAF survived, Germany never invaded Britain. This was Hitler's first strategic mistake. He ignored professionals. He listened only to his pride. Yet even then, Germany still controlled Europe. The empire looked secure, which made the next decision even more fatal. In Hitler's headquarters in East Prussia, the Wolfschanz, the Wolf's Lair, maps covered the walls. To Hitler, Europe was not a collection of nations. It was a chessboard. He stared eastward. The Soviet Union frightened him ideologically and tempted him economically. Ukraine had grain. The Caucasus had oil. Russia had land for German expansion. Hitler believed communism was weak, corrupt, and racially inferior. He told his generals the Soviet Union would collapse in weeks. "Kick in the door," he said, "and the whole rotten structure will fall." Many officers disagreed. Germany was already fighting Britain. Germany had limited oil. Germany had stretched supply lines. But Hitler no longer listened. Victory had convinced him he could not fail. So he signed the order. Operation Barbarossa. Before dawn, more than 3 million German soldiers moved east. It was the largest invasion in human history. Tanks thundered forward. Artillery shattered silence. Planes destroyed Soviet airfields on the ground. Entire Red Army divisions vanished in days. At first, Barbarossa looked brilliant. Soviet troops were surrounded. Hundreds of thousands became prisoners. Cities fell one after another. Hitler's armies advanced hundreds of miles. Europe still looked German. But behind the advance, something dangerous grew. Distance. Russia was not France. In France, cities were close, roads were smooth, railways worked. In Russia, everything was far apart. Villages disappeared into forests. Roads turned into mud. Rail lines were a different width and had to be rebuilt. German trucks broke down. Fuel ran short. Winter clothing was not issued because Hitler expected victory before cold arrived. But Russia does not respect expectations. As German forces pushed deeper, supply lines stretched thinner and thinner. The farther Germany went, the weaker control became. Hitler believed the Red Army would disintegrate. It didn't. Stalin ordered factories dismantled and moved east beyond German reach. Entire industries traveled on trains. New tanks, planes, and rifles poured out faster than Germany could destroy them. Millions of Soviet soldiers replaced the dead. Civilians built defenses. The state did not fall. It hardened. By autumn 1941, German armies reached the gates of Moscow. Snow began falling. Engines froze. Soldiers wore summer uniforms in winter. Guns jammed. For the first time in the war, the Wehrmacht stopped. And when Germany stopped, the Red Army attacked. In December, Soviet counterattacks smashed into frozen German lines. German troops were exhausted, underdressed, underfed, and overextended. They had advanced too far, too fast. Entire divisions froze in place. Thousands lost fingers, toes, and lives to frostbite. Germany did not retreat gracefully. It bled backward. Hitler had promised quick victory. Instead, he had created a second, massive war while still fighting Britain. His empire now fought on two impossible fronts. This was the beginning of the end. Back in Europe, occupation became harder. Partisans sabotaged railways. Resistance movements grew. Germany needed more troops everywhere. But most soldiers were now trapped in the east. Fuel shortages worsened. Factories struggled. Cities faced bombers from Britain. Germany still controlled Europe on paper. But real control requires movement, supply, and stability. And Barbarossa was draining all three. Hitler's single decision had turned his empire into a giant battlefield. In 1942, Hitler doubled down instead of pulling back. Instead of stabilizing Europe, he chased oil in the south of Russia. He split his forces. One group pushed toward the Caucasus. Another marched into a city called Stalingrad. That city would become the grave of his empire. But that, after failing to crush the Soviet Union in 1941, Hitler stood at a crossroads. His generals advised consolidation. Shorter lines, defensive positions, time to rebuild. Hitler rejected all of it. Instead, he chased oil. Germany was starving for fuel. Without it, tanks could not move, planes could not fly, and ships could not sail. The Caucasus region held the oil fields Hitler believed would save his empire. But between Germany and that oil stood one name, Stalingrad. The city on the Volga was not only strategic, it was symbolic. It carried Stalin's name. Hitler wanted it erased from the map, so in the summer of 1942, German armies pushed south. At first, the advance felt like old times. Soviet units fell back. Steppe grass burned. Luftwaffe bombers flattened cities ahead of the tanks. German officers believed victory had returned. But war does not repeat itself kindly. Stalingrad was not built for defense. It was built for life. Factories, apartments, schools, tram lines. Hitler turned it into rubble from the air. Tens of thousands died in bombing raids. Fires spread through wooden neighborhoods. Smoke blocked the sun. But rubble became protection. Every broken wall became cover. Every cellar became a bunker. The Red Army changed its doctrine. They did not defend lines. They defended meters. German soldiers called it Rattenkrieg, rat war. They fought for staircases. They fought for rooms. They fought for piles of bricks that used to be homes. Sometimes Germans and Soviets slept in the same building, separated by a single wall. Snipers hunted constantly. Soldiers went mad. Yet Germany pushed forward slowly. Too slowly. Because while the Sixth Army fought inside the city, something massive gathered outside it. Soviet generals Zhukov and Vasilevsky were patient. They knew the Germans were strongest in the city and weakest on the flanks. Guarding the German sides were Romanian, Hungarian, and Italian units with little armor and few anti-tank weapons. In November 1942, the Soviets struck. Not at the city. Around it. Thousands of Soviet tanks and soldiers smashed into Axis flanks. The defense collapsed almost instantly. Soviet spearheads raced around Stalingrad like closing jaws. Within days, the German Sixth Army was surrounded. Over 250,000 men trapped. Göring promised the Luftwaffe could supply them by air. It was a lie. Planes could not deliver enough food, fuel, or ammunition. Winter arrived. Inside the pocket, German soldiers froze. They ate horses, then dogs, then leather. Ammunition was rationed. Hospitals filled with frostbitten men missing fingers and feet. Soviet artillery hammered constantly. German radios begged for permission to break out. Hitler refused. He promoted their commander Paulus to field marshal, knowing no German field marshal had ever surrendered. Paulus surrendered anyway. On February 2, 1943, the Sixth Army ceased to exist. Over 90,000 Germans marched into captivity. Germany lost not just men. It lost the myth of invincibility. Across Europe, people whispered, Germany could be beaten. Hitler's empire shook. After Stalingrad, everything changed. Germany no longer attacked. It defended. In North Africa, British and American forces crushed the Afrika Korps. Tunisia fell. Over 250,000 Axis soldiers surrendered. Italy collapsed politically. Mussolini was overthrown. The Allies landed in Sicily and southern Italy. Germany had to rush division south to hold a new front. Everywhere, Hitler's empire was now reacting instead of controlling. And reacting is how empires die. While German armies struggled, Allied bombers filled the sky. American B-17s by day, British Lancasters by night. Hamburg burned in firestorms. Berlin shook endlessly. Oil refineries, factories, rail yards vanished under bombs. Germany's industrial heart began to suffocate. Fuel production collapsed. Tank divisions sat motionless. Pilots trained without fuel. Control of Europe depends on mobility. Germany was losing mobility. The empire still existed on maps, but maps lie. Reality was burning. Across occupied Europe, resistance movements sensed change. In France, Maquis sabotaged railways. In Poland, underground armies grew. In Yugoslavia, Tito's partisans tied down entire German armies. Bridges exploded, trains derailed. German officers were assassinated in daylight. Hitler had to send combat divisions away from fronts just to protect occupation. The empire began fighting itself from inside. Control became fear-based, not stable. And fear never lasts.